Hello, Mr. Gheorghiu.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
Well, trying to show you something interesting also.
Okay. I'm sure we'll see something interesting. So we are now in 1980 at the US Open in Atlanta.
Right.
Yes.
I was trying to defend my title there. It was one of the most important games at the end of the tournament, and this game was really decisive. I had to win the game to try to win
To
again.
finish first.
To be first, of course. No. So my opponent was an international master from United States. Surprisingly enough, he played the opening and the middle game better than many very strong grandmasters. He understood very well the variation. Well, he was playing very well the King's Indian. So therefore, the game will be very interesting. You'll see.
Okay.
So of course, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d6, f3 castle, bishop e3. So now we have the Zemish again.
The Zemish
attack
famous
against the
Zemish.
King's Indian. Yes. And now he played knight bd7. This, in that time, was a very interesting move because it was almost a novelty. Some other moves were knight c6, a6, b6, e5, and so on. Knight bd7 was not so popular because it seemed that after knight h3, white is a little bit better in all positions. But I prefer to play the normal line with bishop d3 and knight g2. It's also very good for white and gives always a small edge, in any position. So bishop d3 and now c5 and knight g2. So now if black takes in d4, after knight d4, knight c5 or knight d5, he goes back with the bishop in e2, and we have a kind of Maroczy position where white is always, clearly better. So of course he played b6. So from this moment, it will be a positional struggle, for both, where black tries to play always the best moves and have a very nice position where he's defensive, of course, like always. But the white's advantage is quite small. We'll see. For the night, we'll maneuver the next moves here and there. So here, bishop b7.
It will be a balanced battles.
Balanced, yes, for the moment, of course. So white has a little bit more space, so therefore he's a little bit better in all positions. So now after b3, a6, now white closes the center, plays d5. And the problem is that after the move b3, after knight e5, bishop c2, white can retreat the bishop, doesn't give the bishop from d3, and it's always a little bit better in all kind of positions. So, of course, e6, a4. Now everything is closed on the queen side. Black has no threat to play later on b5. So therefore, having a little bit more space, white has more possibilities, tactical and positional possibilities. Of course, queen e7, queen d2, takes in d5, takes with e, now opens the diagonal for the white bishop, of course. But it's a long way, of course. So now he played rook e8, bishop g5, of course, queen f8, h3, h6, bishop h4. Well, little by little, white doesn't have anything decisive yet, but has a little bit more space, and later on, the position will be always a little bit better, in any kind of any possibility will be in white's favor, we'll see.
So white has like a clear plan.
Usually the plan is, white will try to attack a little bit positionally on the king side, but it's nothing decisive if black plays well, So afterwards, even if we'll trade some pieces on the e file, later on the two rooks, we'll see, yeah. Later on, and even after we trade also the queens, we'll have some better endgame on the other side. When white plays at the end, the idea is to play a4, a5, and having clearly better structure, pawn structure in endgame. Therefore, white will be better.
So in the end, it will be
But it's complicated. It's not so easy. You have to be patient and, little by little, as I told you.
Yeah.
So if black plays well, I mean, so queen e7. Now bishop f2, it's a very good move because black was already threatening somehow, if possible, knight e4. And when you take in e4, you give the bishop from h4, but not immediately because there is not so easy. But it was a threat, theoretically it was a threat. So bishop f2 is very good. Knight e5, bishop goes back to c2, and queen c7. Okay, so the first part of the game is over. White is a little bit better. Black defended very well. I was also a little bit surprised that my opponent knew the best line, and he played much better than many other very strong grandmasters. But it's okay. Black
So he
has
was
to wait.
well prepared. Even
Yeah, he
so.
was very well prepared, but it was human analysis I mean, it was not by computer like today, you see.
Yeah.
Yeah. So queen c7, bishop back, attacking in h6. Now king h7, rook e1, little by little. Rook e7, f4. And now after f4, knight d7, bishop back now. No, g4 first, yes. A little bit more space, no? Rook e8, bishop back to f2, knight g8, knight g3. Wait, white agrees to trade the two rooks. Now it's clear that black has the possibility to trade the two rooks. It's always better for someone who has to, to be in a defensive position. If he can trade a few pieces, it's okay. So white is still a little bit better, as always. Bishop takes one, queen d8. Now he wants to trade queens also, on the e file. King h2, bishop c8. Okay, queen e2, bishop f8, bishop g2, and now finally he plays queen e7. I mean, to trade queens. Okay. So now, right here, we have this possibility. If everything was blocked on the queen side, white didn't have this possibility. But to stop this idea, black had to play a5, and after a5, knight b5, he has problems with the pawn from d6. So therefore, he didn't play like this. Now, after a5, all endgame is much better for white. But you have to realize, it's not so easy.
Because of the pawn structure.
You'll see the pawn structure, of course. Yes, he took the queen, so knight takes. He must take in b5, in a5. Knight a4. White takes back the pawn and has a better structure.
But why he must take here? Why not?
Well, if he doesn't take, white can play knight a4 or take himself in b6 and afterwards knight e4. Clearly better for white, in all kinds of positions.
Mhm.
But like this, well, it's very difficult to understand. But until here, everything was more or less theory in that time. A long time ago, like this, without computer. But
Yeah.
the best line for white and the best line for black also.
Up to here.
Up to here. But even like this, black has some problems. Not so big, but enough. Enough to have a bad ending. A bad end game. So now takes back in a5, bishop e7, black must wait, of course. And knight g3 controls the square e4 again, and now opens the game after king f3, king f8, b4. The second time that white has a possibility to do something on the queen side, now it's very clear that every endgame is much better for white. Why? Because after a few moves, white has the very strong pawn on d5, which is protected by the pawn from c4, and the structure of black's pawns are not so good. The pawn a6 and c5 represents two small weaknesses. So therefore, the ending is much better for white, you see. So after before king e8, now black has the possibility to trade again another piece in c5. Knight takes c5, knight takes, pawn takes. Okay, so now we have this kind of endgame, much better for white, but you have to realize, you have to demonstrate how, you see. So bishop d7, and exactly here after g5, in this position, black is lost already, you see.
Yeah.
Why? Because white has the possibility to come later on with the knight in e4, attacking the pawn from c5. But unfortunately, I was in time trouble and I made a small mistake. Until here, I played a very, very good game, you see. And exactly in the last moment, I made a small mistake and I had to win again a winning position, you see. So after g5 has to take, I took, and now knight h5, the only move. Because after knight h7, it was passive. After h4, white is much, much better, you know. So, okay, knight h5, and now after knight e4, white is probably winning already. Knight e4, for example, after knight e4, bishop takes h3 is the only move, you know. Bishop, and now d6. d6, the only good move is bishop d8, because bishop f8 is much weaker, you know. So now takes in d8, takes in d8, knight takes c5, and it's finished. You know, the two pawns win in every position, you know. Two passed pawns like this, c and d,
Yeah.
completely win, you know. Yeah. So unfortunately, I wasn't sure about the time trouble, you know, and I took in a h5. It was the last move, you know, in time trouble, and it was a bad move. After this, white keeps the advantage, but it's not so big like before. So finally, you have to win again a very difficult position. You have to win a very complicated endgame where white is clearly better, but is still not winning, you see.
Against
Yeah.
two bishops.
Yeah, two bishops against two bishops was very complicated endgame, you see. So bishop e3, king e3, king d7. Now you have to go to b6. He has time to come to d6, of course. Now I gave check. And okay, now it's very nice for white, but still not winning, you see. Bishop c8, he must wait, of course. And king e4. It seems that white is almost winning because he's almost Zugzwang here, you know. But after f5, the game is unclear again because now you have to take, unfortunately, you have to take in f6. If you don't take in f6, you don't have a possibility to come in with the king. If you can't come in with the king, you don't win, you see. So I had to take in f6. He takes with the king, and now it's very unclear. Maybe he's winning for white. I've been a good chance to win. Maybe he can hold the position, make a draw. You know, it's not very unclear. He has to wait, and white hopes to come in such a position where it's almost Zugzwang anytime, you know. So bishop e3, bishop d6, of course, king d3. White tries to come on the other side, if possible, to a5. You know, that is the threat. But now we have again a position where the time trouble approaches, and it's very, very near. So he was also very tired, my opponent, and finally he makes a small mistakes. We'll see, you know. So after bishop g3, bishop e3, now he had to, after this check, king d2, he had to go back in d6. But as I told you before, he had probably the idea that the two pawns h5 and a6 represent also some kind of threat for white. I mean, the two pawns, maybe they could be dangerous, you know, because they run very fast. But that was the mistake to take in h4. He had to play bishop d6. Maybe there had a small chance to make draw, you know. Now we have a very complicated endgame where the two pass pawns c4 and d5 are much stronger than the pawns from h5 and a6. You'll see. Finally, white wins by force this endgame. King e2, h4, of course, bishop d6, and now h3. The pawn comes very quickly, you know.
Yeah.
But now, after this very strong move, bishop h2, white has a very nice position where black has no defense against, you know, the two pawns. The two pass pawns come very quickly on d65, and that wins by force, you know. So it's very, you know, very unusual, the position from the two white bishops, you know, one in a4, the other one in h2, but they are protecting the two pawns, and the two pawns come, you know, and you have nothing, you have no defense against
They're
this.
protecting the pawns and also blocking the...
Blocking everything, and black has no defense, you know. The black pieces are really two spectators. The two bishops, the two black bishops are really, you know, looking to see what happens. Nothing to do. Yeah. So king e6, c5. No. So now what to do is no defense. The threat is clear. C6. So after c6, he has to give the bishop because otherwise after c7 is even worse. So he has to give the bishop. He took in c6. I took in c6, and he resigned because the advantage is
Yes.
decisive. It was very, very interesting end game. Very unusual because normally in King's Indian you don't arrive, very often in such an end game. Usually it's a tactical way to win or to lose. But like this was very important, and finally I could win the tournament. It was a decisive game to win the tournament, so I could defend my title, U.S. champion. For the second time, I was able to win again the U.S. championship.
Second time in a row.
In a row, yes. And finally, later on, the next year, the third time in a row. That was also very good.
Nice.
Yeah, very, very, complicated game anyway.
True.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome.